than me, dumbass, using a screen recorder. It just never occurred to me. I don't think Skype used to have a recording function years ago.
Yeah, well, it's recording now. I'll cut out this, the first 20 seconds or so. But
yeah,
let's start in 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, man. How's China treating you?
Doing great. I just finished a class. Class is about kind of like diplomatic etiquette. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically protocol procedures related to diplomacy and kind of the things that people do in diplomacy. It's kind of a new class. I got it thrown at me last year, but last year I only taught it for like 8 weeks. Not sure why. And this semester, it's a full 16-week course, and it's a lot of fun. Got to talk about, well, basically, I've got this textbook that focuses on protocol and stuff related to diplomacy, and but I try to kind of expand the conversation and talk about actual stuff happening in the world, which you can imagine you got to be a little bit careful on. But yeah, good class. Small group of kids. They're all smart, good at discussing things.
Are we talking international diplomacy or just diplomacy in general?
I guess, diplomacy in general. The thing is that my brain's not working very well right now, so I'm not going to be dredging details. But so exactly what are the protocols for when, say, they receive like leaders from other countries at the White House? Like, what do they actually do? How do they actually do it? It's complicated shit.
Yeah. So like formalities.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it sounds interesting. Well, I suppose this is our first official podcast. We had a meandering one a couple weeks ago. It was fun though. So I guess we just start at the beginning. We met at Washington State University, and we were both studying philosophy, and I think we had an epistemology or metaphysics class together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we just started hanging out and playing video games, shooting the shit about philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got a job overseas, and that's kind of what the purpose of this podcast is. Your experiences, so kind of your general biography, your experiences overseas teaching English. I'd like to get into some of the subject matter and how it's different between, because you've taught in both South Korea and China.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be interesting to transpose those two experiences. So let her rip.
All right. So, well, first of all, that means we met slightly over 10 years ago. Is that correct? Maybe 12 years ago?
2010, I believe, is when we first met.
Sure. Yeah. I honestly don't remember if it was an epistemology. I think actually it was the epistemology class, because it was just me and you, and a couple of our other friends at the time. They weren't in that class. I think it was just me and you, kind of sitting in the back, cringing at some of the teachers' pets. But anyway,
actually, the first time I saw you, we had biomedical ethics together, and I was sitting in the back, and you had this fro, and you were sitting the front left of the class, and I didn't know you, but turns out we were both studying philosophy. So that was a pretty good class too, that biomedical. Kabasenchi, I believe his name was.
Yeah, he was a good professor. He was kind of like the ideal of what you want. Openly Christian, but still kind of fair and balanced in his approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is right. I did have a friggin' like afro at the time, and I was wearing that shitty Carhartt as well. But yeah, we met there, hung out, played a lot of Skyrim, stuff like that, and then basically graduated in May of 2013. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Pullman is a cheap town, so I thought I might just hang out for a little while, do like the bare minimum work to pay for rent, which was only a couple $100 at the time, which is insane now, I guess. And yeah, I think I got a job. Delivering newspapers in the morning, which was actually kind of fun. Waking up at ridiculous hours and just throwing newspapers out the window. And but that only lasted a couple of months, and I kind of thought, well, I really got to do something. And I just happened to be walking around uh, Pullman doing nothing, and there just happened to be a job fair kind of thing. I think it might have been inside either the basketball stadium. I can't remember where it was, but I just walked around, and most of the things there were not very interesting to me, and lots of internship stuff. It was like jobs and internships, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them just I don't know. I didn't even walk in like intending to seriously look at any like jobs, but I thought, oh, I'll just take a look. I'm curious, and I don't know. Somehow one of the ladies waved me down, I guess, and she basically just said, "Would you like to teach English?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a." Back then, I was so ignorant. I was like, "Well, I'm not like an English major, or I don't know anything about English literature really. I did philosophy, and I have a minor in history." And she's like, "Well, that doesn't really matter. What they care about is that you got a degree, you're educated, and you're a native speaker of English." And I said, "Okay, who's they?" And they said, "Well, I represent schools, private schools in South Korea, where they teach kids English because over there it's really, really important for the tests they have to take, but also lots of them aspire to study abroad eventually when they're older. So English is a big thing, big industry, lots of money to be made, which I'll talk about more of that later. So, yeah, I didn't really talk to anybody. I don't think. I don't remember consulting my parents or anybody. I just said I got to get out of this town and start making some money. I did have student loans. Still have a little bit of those student loans left, actually, because I've been kind of waiting. Like, are they going to get canceled or not? But anyways, yeah, they gave me like the email address and contact information for a particular school in a city in the south of Korea, and I got in touch with them. They gave me a phone call. I was talking to who I found out later was the wife of the CEO of the company, and she's pretty involved with the running of the place. And yeah, just kind of a fairly generic job interview. I think for that job, they're less interested in your actual qualifications and stuff and just like sussing out your personality, like
Mm-hmm.
whether you're an asshole or not, which I completely agree with. I'll talk later about how later I did some recruiting, and that's so important. Just personality and getting along with people. Like, you can get trained up, but if the person is an asshole, then it's just going to be terrible. Anyways, she was asking me questions about my family and stuff. She's like, "Oh, do you have any brothers and sisters?" I got like, "Oh, one brother." "No sisters?" "No." And she said, "Oh, your mother must be, very sad that she didn't have any daughters." And then I said, "Actually, no, my mom told me she's glad she didn't have daughters because daughters in America are insane."
Dude, that's such a weird thing for her to say.
Uh, you know, and yeah, I made her laugh, and that's how I knew I got the job, basically. And so once they said, "Okay, we'd like you to come work with us, work for us," they gave me a big document outlining the procedures for doing the visa. And skip all over that boring detail. I landed in South Korea roughly 4 or 5 months later in 2014, so around February, March, something like that. And yeah, I got started. And wow, it was definitely an experience, kind of terrifying at first, standing in front of a bunch of kids and having a fairly rapid kind of training schedule. The people who were already there was one American lady. and a Canadian guy, and that's it, basically. The guy, or the person I was replacing, I believe, had already left just like the week before. So there wasn't any overlap. Anyways, they got me trained up on like what you do in the classroom, the textbooks, the different courses they teach, um, and just general tips and stuff. But they kind of throw you in the deep end pretty quickly, which I actually kind of appreciate in the long run, or I appreciate in retrospect. Sorry, because I've been on the training end or doing the training for new teachers, and there's kind of a sweet spot between giving people absolutely no training at all and throwing them in, and it's a disaster, or keeping them in the shallow end of the pool too long, and they kind of just don't really adapt, and they're just not very good when they actually get into the classroom. So, but also I think it's about a little bit about talent and personality. But yeah, my first day was not good. I remember, yeah, the students could see right through me, and these were slightly older kids. These were like more like middle school, going on high school kids. They could tell that I was super nervous and just like not confident, and anybody can pick up on that. And
Sure.
I finished the class, and I was like, well, that wasn't good. And my kind of like boss manager type lady, head teacher, um, she basically just said, "Fake it until you make it," and that
Nice.
is
It's good advice.
definitely the best advice I ever got. Which is just like walk in there super confident, even if you're not, you know, because you need to project that confidence. And I got I my brain switched really quickly within like a week to just doing that. There was a lot of learning involved, though. Still, just like again, getting used to the textbooks and the training wasn't super extensive, so I was kind of left to figure it out by myself, like exactly how I mete out discipline, keep the kids on task, keep things fun, which is super important. Um, and you pretty much had no choice but to improve really quickly because on many days you're teaching for sometimes 5 hours in a row, 5 days a week, and you have to have everything prepared ahead of time. And if you're a new teacher, you spend huge amounts of time on preparation, which can easily be double the amount of time you're actually in the classroom. So if you're teaching for an hour, your prep time might be 2 hours. But if you're smart, clever, got some common sense, and then over the weeks and months, you get a lot of experience under your belt, your prep time gradually goes down, 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 down to where if you're teaching for an hour, it only took you half hour to prepare for that. And then I'd say roughly around the year mark of teaching is when you feel that if you care and you are trying to improve, you can achieve a kind of baseline. I'm not going to say mastery, but just enough experience to where you can more or less teach without much preparation. The only preparation you have to do is if there's any materials you need to print out and stuff like that. And that is sufficient uh, because all of the techniques and the procedures and stuff, that's all just unconscious at that point. And that feels really good because you get to the point where very little of your brain power is being used on handling the basics, which means that most of your brain power is being used on making it fun or thinking of what you're going to do to be funny in the class and stuff like that. And that's when your classes start to become really, really, really good. Um, and I taught all sorts of subjects. There's like reading focus classes, writing focus classes, listening, speaking, that kind of thing. One of my favorite classes was for some of the really good kids who were older, who were definitely like on track to go into university and stuff like that. And that was it was called classics class, but it wasn't really. It's just like a big books class. Just find a book, big book, read it with the kids, discuss it, all that kind of stuff. I remember we did the Great, or not the Great Gatsby, Grapes of Wrath. Yeah.
Nice.
and that was fun, really great. And so yeah, tons of experience, lots of different subjects, all different kind of age levels. Uh, you go from like teaching the older kids the big books, and then there's teaching little kids shit like phonics, basically. And that is a completely different challenge because little kids have no attention span, and you gotta actually hammer in the practice. So playing lots of games and stuff, uh, simple games, having them run around and stuff, uh, jumping on things using flashcards. It's actually a lot of fun. And so I think things were basically good for like a year because I was growing and changing and improving.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I didn't really spend any time hanging out with people outside of work though. Because this was like my first, I would call kind of semi-serious job ever, really. And I wanted to do it well. And also, I just did not get along with other foreigners. They just were not my style, really. I just didn't get because it's kind of a different topic, getting into more cultural stuff. Like you said, we're going to get to that later. But it is true. A lot of expats, they're just not interested in the job. They don't take it seriously. They're just traveling. They just want to party and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically would do my job, go home, and fire up a PlayStation.
Yeah, we played Battlefield 4 quite a bit.
Yes, yes. Yeah, at some point I think in this around the year mark I discovered Witcher 3, which was awesome. Really great way of just kind of winding down and progressing in the game a little bit, turning it off next day, progress a little bit forward, so on and so forth. So, but the thing is though, is that I started to even by before the first year though, my critical brain was sort of thinking about the system that I was within, this private school where parents pay their kids go there after normal school, and I mean we basically started teaching around 4:30 p.m. and going until 8:30 9 o'clock at night. That's because it's an after school extra kind of school
Curricular.
basically. They called them academies because I don't know, they come up with the most pretentious name for this kind of education. And there's English academies, there's math academies, there's all sorts of different kinds because super competitive over there, passing exams and getting into university and stuff. But anyways, I just didn't. I started to have some really negative kind of opinions about the methods employed, the way the kids are treated, the amount of stress they're under, and also it was so obvious that the older the kids got, the more and more crushed and depressed they seemed, and I basically started to feel like, well, I'm part of this system, so it's partly my fault too. I'm contributing to this, but I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep going, do my best, keep learning. I knew there was still a lot to learn and a lot more experience. I was very happy with how much progress I made in 1 year, and I thought, okay, if I just do one more year, then I'm gonna be really good at this shit, and then I can think
Mm-hmm.
about moving on. Uh, but I didn't realize though that that second year was gonna sap me of all of my like mental resources because it was like it got exponentially worse because once I started thinking critically about everything, I couldn't really turn that off. I'm not capable of doing that the way some people seem to be, where they can just go, I don't give a shit. I'm getting paid. Just go in, teach, and go home and forget about it. I really started to kind of go, I hate this.
Yeah, you didn't like it.
And also just the way some of us were treated by the administration, which if you go online and you type in Korea uh, academies job experience, a lot of people have very negative experiences there. I remember one of my colleagues came over. He was American, and he had an allergic reaction once, not like a super serious one, like you have to go to the hospital or you're gonna die, but pretty serious. I think he ate some fish and his face started to go all red and splotchy, having a bit of difficulty breathing and stuff. And I went to my boss and I just said, he's got to go to the hospital like now. And they're like, well, can he just teach like 4 hours of classes first and you can go after? And I was just like, what? No. And basically, when they saw that I was visibly upset about that, then they kind of pulled me aside and made it out like it's my fault, basically. Because there, the culture is you're not really supposed to uh, show any kind of discontent or they're really into like harmony and making sure everybody's on the same page and stuff. And basically, the fact that I was just openly disagreeing with what the boss was saying was a bit of a problem. I didn't get any actual warning or anything. They still were happy with how I was performing, but it was just like pretty much at that moment, I think roughly 6 months before I left, I was like, I'm definitely done with this place. Didn't know what I was going to do after, but I was like, I'm definitely moving on from this place. Maybe I'll stay in Korea, so, but yeah, by the end of the second year, I was like, I'm definitely done. And I was very burnt out, very, very burnt out. Um, and so I went back home for a year, and then that's basically when we hung out for I don't know how long it was, but I definitely needed some time off because I mean, again, this is all retrospect, but I had not been diagnosed with ADHD so yet. And so, in retrospect, I think that was one of the big causes for being burnt out so quickly from that kind of job. But the thing is that a lot of the burnout was it was like it wasn't so much the teaching stuff, it was the negative thoughts about the system that I was in and dealing with the people that I was dealing with. I knew that it's like I'm happy being a teacher, it's fun. I'm actually pretty good at it. This is the first thing I think that I actually can do reasonably well and make money from it. So yeah, I went home for a year, basically blew through all of my savings, doing nothing, playing lots of video games, which was a lot of fun. Playing Dark Souls 3, I think we did, yeah, which I sucked at.
Yeah, we played a bunch of games, but I think you played Witcher, and then we played a lot of Battlefield,
Yeah,
which,
Battlefield was definitely the best.
yeah, dude, Battlefield 4. That was when it was at its peak. Well, we worked on some other things. We were, kind of brainstorming about, well, you started kind of writing a manuscript for
Yeah,
a book on descriptors for political parties, like the history of political parties and terminology.
yeah,
And this
yeah,
was,
yeah.
and part of that was just our general feeling towards, the political system in the United States. But Trump was starting to get traction, and
Right.
we were like,
Yeah.
this is very interesting. It's gonna be it's gonna be fun watching this play out. And he actually fucking won.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I remember that. In fact, yeah, okay, yeah. So I just remember we were playing a lot of Battlefield, blowing shit up, having fun, and then yeah, just talking about politics, philosophy, all that kind of stuff in our free time, and watching stuff. We watched some things. Did we watch True Detective? Some other good stuff. Basically, just enjoying ourselves. And yeah, then I remember, yeah, Trump was like, holy shit, there's no way he's going to win. And of course, everyone said Hillary's definitely going to win. Hillary's definitely going to win. Sure enough, she did not. And then I do remember actually that night going like, well, might want to leave the country. Kind of not too seriously because I also
No.
hate it when people say that. Like Americans going like, I'm going to move to Canada. It's like, shut the
Yeah.
fuck up.
If you don't
Uh,
like it, leave it.
but yeah, at least in like later, I did use it kind of as an excuse. Like, well, I want to get out of here because I think things are going to get worse. and I'd like to just remove myself from the situation. But also, something else had happened or did happen later, which kind of impelled me to leave that I don't really want to talk about.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, eventually I thought, okay, I want to get back to teaching. I know how to do it. I can slip back in, but I just decided at some point I don't want to go back to Korea. It's a very small country. There's not many big cities. There's basically like four. There's like four cities you can go to. And I thought, well, if I did go back there and I did commit myself to maybe traveling a bit, it's like, well, I've got like four cities. And so I kind of went online, I was looking at different stuff, looking at Europe, for example, uh, places like Spain, which I heard is really good. But over there, the standards are, or the requirements are much higher in terms of qualifications. I'll say that. So, like to get a job in Spain, I remember at the time it was just like master's degree minimum. Uh, it doesn't matter if you're actually good or not. It's they just have these rules, these straight up rules for filtering out people. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, and also I just think Americans in general have a harder time going to Europe because it's like, well, we can just get British people much closer, easier, more reliable because they're closer and stuff like that. So I was like, screw Europe. One option is to go to the Middle East, places like Dubai, where you can it's hell living there, uh, but you can make a ton of money very quickly, basically. So a lot of people that go there, they teach a lot for like 1 year, make a ton of money, and then leave. I was like, all right, well, there's one option, but and then a lot of people were like Japan. Japan's really cool, and I think Japan is cool. It's very uh, it's a really cool place. But I kind of thought, well, if everybody says you should go to Japan, then I don't want to go to Japan. And also, I think the foreigners who go to Japan are probably assholes, anyways. So I want to say I put I must have reached out to somebody, but I feel like I was actually emailed by somebody. I must have put myself on some kind of email list, and then one of these schools from China sent me an email just going like, well, we're located in a city called Qingdao, which I had never heard of at the time. And would you like to have an interview? We've got a small school. Oh yeah, and the information was this is run by the boss is a British guy basically married to a Chinese woman, and
Hmm.
so we've got more Western style management stuff, and that sounded really good to me because of my experience living in Korea, where all of the administrators and the boss were Korean. If I didn't mention that earlier, I should have. Uh, if my boss was a Korean woman, basically. But here we've got a guy, British guy, young guy, which was nice. It seemed like the operation was fairly young, which I thought could be a good thing. More progressive, perhaps, maybe a little bit more hip to newer, better teaching methods and stuff. Had an interview, a lot of fun, a lot of laughing, joking and stuff like that. Uh, and I just thought, why the hell not? The pay is a lot less compared to in Korea, but I don't care about that. I just need to go somewhere, kind of get away, just get away. I just wanted to get away from America and like people I knew. I wanted to like kind of start fresh in a way. And yeah, the visa process for that was a bit more hectic just because it's China. And I believe you visited me when you came over one time and I had to like go to like the UPS or not the UPS, the FedEx, I think. I think I needed to mail
And
something. That was part of the visa
when we went
process.
to Portland,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
came down for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working on the Chinese visa at the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And a few months later, I was in China for the beginning of March 2017. Yeah. So yeah, something like that. And it was great. It was a new experience. Suddenly, I'm working with a much larger crew of foreigners, and they were very international. We had a woman from Argentina. We had a couple of British guys. We had Irish guy who my friend Mark. He's my colleague now. Actually, that's how we met. He was working there, and then we had a Hungarian guy with perfect English. He was really funny. A guy called Andy, and yeah, it was good. And basically, we all had our own classrooms, and the students would just come into our classrooms, and it was still kind of the same, roughly the same model. So these. It was an after-school English academy, whatever you want to call it. They don't really call them academies here, but anyways, parents pay money to send their kids, and yeah, teach for about 4, sometimes 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. Come in around 1:30 to do your preparation work, which when you're in the beginning and you're learning the new textbooks, the new classes and stuff, you easily use all of that time before between 1:30 and when your classes start. But over time, and then I ramped up very quickly due to my experience I already had in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, though, is I came in actually having more experience than some of them because a few of the people working there were brand new to the whole thing. So I was in this weird situation where it's like I'm a new guy here, but I have more experience, and that had never happened to me before. Another thing too, though, is that so when I went to Korea, I just got in based on the fact that I have a bachelor's degree, and then in China they said you need to have you need to have a TEFL certificate in addition to having a degree, or you can substitute the TEFL if you don't have a TEFL.
What's a TEFL?
Teaching English as a foreign language certificate. There's a bunch of online things. It's bullshit. It's
Yeah.
bullshit. It's the whole thing's bullshit. But you can substitute it, or what is substitutable for it is if you already have 2 years of experience. It's like, well, perfect. I got that.
Right.
So yeah, I came and yeah, I the whole new classes. Oh yeah, and then still mostly teaching kids, but after the kids went home, sometimes adults would show up. Uh, they signed up for classes, and sometimes they have groups, and sometimes you teach them individually and stuff. And actually, me and my friend Mark, we were by far the most popular teachers for the adults because the adults would the adults, they didn't have set classes. Basically, they would buy points and then they could just show up whenever they wanted to because they're busy. A lot of them are very busy people, business people who they're learning English either just for fun or they need to sharpen it up for their business. Qingdao is a coastal city. There's a very important port here, so there's a lot of like import export stuff that happens. So a lot of the
Trade.
people, business people, they need good English. um, but yeah, pretty much every night I was getting like at least 2 or 3 adults every day, and that was fun because they were really good and interesting. And I just think they liked me and they liked Mark just because we're good conversationalists, good at uh, kind of sensing what their level is, sensing what they're interested in, and yeah, just having fun talking with them. Funnily enough, those are the easiest classes ever because you don't really have to prepare much. Basically, they walk in and say, "I want to talk about this today." It's like, okay. And I think being a little bit of a dilettante, knowing quite a bit about a lot of different things is very useful for that kind of job. And I wouldn't consider myself really having expert knowledge in anything, but I know quite a bit about a lot of different things. So it's pretty easy to just talk to somebody about something and find an interesting topic and let it rip for an hour, hour and a half. So yeah, that was like that. Also, I because of the people I was working with, it was a lot. I had a lot more fun personal life. I wasn't going home and just playing video games. We would go out and get beers and talk about our classes, and I learned a lot from other teachers, a lot of practical stuff from them, and yeah, after about a year, some of the people who came in just for 1 year, they were cycling out, and we were bringing in new people. And my boss, it was just like, would you like to train these guys? Basically, would you like to just take over this take this responsibility and make sure that like their standard is higher earlier than they were last year. Basically, let's try to learn from our mistakes and get people kind of like just train them up better than we did last year, basically. And I said, all right, I'll give it a try.
So you started doing kind of managerial training duties as well?
Yeah, pretty much. And I thought this was a good idea. And basically, I had some suggestions. I said, well, I got an even better idea. I said, basically, what I can do is, what we need to do is hire one additional person than we normally have, which is expensive. A whole new employee is expensive. And I said, but I can justify it through the efficiency argument, basically, which is that what I'll do is I will become basically a trainer and a recruiter, and but I will be a permanent substitute teacher, basically, because before we only had enough people to where anybody could cover their own classes. And if a teacher is sick, which happens because you're teaching kids, and kids are just like like plague factories. But unfortunately, so sometimes teachers get sick, and basically we just have it's just the way the industry works. Unfortunately, it's very very hard to cancel classes because parents are unhappy. It disrupts the like the homework and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also the teachers are unhappy being forced to teach when they are sick. So I said, let's just I'll be a permanent substitute teacher. I'll train, I'll observe, I'll recruit. Um, and then basically, yeah, when teachers are sick, you can just slot me in. And my boss was like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And it worked really, really well. I got like practice at training other people, which is something I'd never done. I also learned how to do interviews and
So you were training the new recruits?
yes, and observing people just generally, just seeing if like how people are doing. Uh, but I would say quickly after that, things started to kind of go a little bit sour because I got a little bit of look. I got a bit of a look at what was happening behind the scenes. So before I was just a teacher, and this opportunity to kind of get promoted basically came along, and I just said, sure, I'll do that. It's new and different. And then once I was like in the office for significant amount of time and seeing how things worked, I was like, oh shit, this is a mess. Uh, and I couldn't believe, I didn't say this, of course, but I couldn't believe how they were operating at the time with the recruiting and how they were doing stuff, and just the general organization of it. It was a mess. And so
Can you get into any details or?
sure, yeah. Well, just like it was just super informal how they were finding people to email. Like they didn't have spreadsheets, they didn't have any, there was no system for keeping things on course and making sure things are done on time and stuff. So I basically just said, all right, I'm going to spend a couple of weeks and just like build like a mini HR department that's actually organized, that has procedures, actual procedures written down for like do this, then this, then this, then this. There's lots of websites, for example, for putting advertisements on, because we have to advertise ourselves. We have to
Mm-hmm.
advertise ourselves. We have to say like, this is our school, this is where we're located, and so before they would just go on the website, pay a little bit of money, and then type it up. And it's like, is there no template for this? You should just have a template to copy and paste from. You should just have the pictures ready to go. Let's make sure the pictures aren't shitty, pixelated, low quality ones. Just like try to bring some standards to it. Don't be lazy. Have a system, again, spreadsheets for all of your passwords and account information for everything, rather than trying to rely on memory. Just, I mean, really common sense
Yeah,
stuff.
just
Yeah.
basic administrative
So yeah,
bullshit.
it's like I'm not a genius. This is just basic stuff and will save you time and labor and frustration, just to make my own job easier. So I did that for a while, and things got better, but I always felt like I was the one pushing to change things and improve things. My boss wasn't really. He was kind of just more interested in just being the boss, and making decisions. But also over time, it got worse to where he would basically steal people's ideas, not just my ideas, but also uh, him and his wife were clearly having disagreements about how to run the business, expand the business, and stuff. But one of the most frustrating things is it was uh, the whole procedures of when new teachers arrive. So picking them up from the airport, getting them settled in their apartment, getting them their first Chinese bank account, making sure they have a phone that works with a Chinese SIM card, for example, all that kind of stuff. Like so, again, so like onboarding people,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like there's no procedure for this. I had to design all of that, and also basically every time a teacher would arrive, I insisted on being there so that they actually saw a foreign face when they arrived, so that would put them at ease. Nobody likes to arrive when there's just a Chinese guy holding a piece of paper with their name on it. Uh, Going like, "Are you?" It's like we should do the bare minimum of actually being there. And my boss, it's like he was a lot better when I started the job, but it's over time. I don't know. I think he got worn down by the business too, and I just think that he wasn't the best decision maker. He liked to make decisions, but he didn't think. Well, he just made a lot of mistakes, and I think that the job was stressing him out a lot more than he let people see. I think it was taking a lot more out of him. He's not a
Mhm.
bad guy. I just don't think he was terribly competent.
Yeah, he
And
wasn't. He wasn't a natural leader.
Yeah, and also his wife just she made some really boneheaded decisions, in my opinion, that kind of torpedoed a lot of progress that we made. And it was just always feeling like just like shoveling shit. And it's like if they just made me the boss, and actually some of the other teachers basically told me that they're like, everything runs well when our boss isn't here and you're basically left to run things. It's like, yeah, because I know how to be a manager, which is to be invisible. My job is to do a bunch of stuff to allow everybody else to do their job well, but no one hears or sees me, basically, hears about me. Like when a manager is doing their job well, it does look like they're doing nothing because everything is
Exactly.
running smoothly. There's a paradox there where people like my boss, he wanted to be seen as doing stuff and making decisions and it's like, no, well, I'm the people, my the teachers, they knew I was helping them, uh probably because I was also taking their classes when they are sick and stuff like that. But anyways, everyone liked me. uh but anybody who's been in the middle management, you feel like you get shit from below and from above. Uh, so sometimes also, I had an American woman. She was a teacher. She was like in her late 40s, and she had no experience, but she thought that she was like the best teacher on the planet, and she's here to save the world. That kind of person. Uh, and she was a nightmare because she did the selfish thing and took advantage of the fact that I was available for substituting. And it would became ridiculous where she was like calling in sick every other day, and it's like, what the just uh, that kind of thing. And So that pissed me off. Eventually, we got rid of her. Um, but also some crazy ass things happened. So let me think. What was the first? Well, I'll just tell you one story. We hired a guy who was already in China, older uh guy, white dude. And on paper, he had a lot of experience. And this is something that I'll talk about more later. But on paper, he had a lot of experience. He taught for many years at many different levels and stuff. It's like, all right, you've got that experience. You really should be able to just do a good job. We just said, look, based on his experience, we really needed to get somebody in fast. Uh, and so this dude arrived. And if somebody's already in China, it's great. It's a lot easier because they already have at least a temporary visa, and then you can get started on their work visa and living permit and all this kind of stuff. Anyways, the most of the teachers they lived in shared accommodation, 2 or 3 teachers to a room, which is fine for the young people. This older guy though, well, he said he didn't care, which was fine, and he didn't care about living. He didn't care about living with another teacher, in theory. But one of the other teachers was from the Bahamas and black, and this old white guy turned out to be an ultra racist. Uh, it's like, what are you doing in China? Anyways, um, and it's like, holy shit, we got to get rid of this guy suddenly. He also turned out to be a huge alcoholic and just a mess. And the thing about the Chinese police here, or just the police in general here, is that they're very reluctant to get involved until after somebody's done something bad. And it's like, well, we don't want him to murder the guy from the Bahamas and then we can get rid of him. So, yeah, my boss. This is actually one of the things that I did like about my boss, though. He was willing to do crazy stuff if he needed to. Basically, what he did is he took this teacher out for a drink because he knew he would get drunk. Uh, and basically, when the guy was completely shit faced, we well, actually, I didn't do it. I wasn't personally involved. This was my boss. He basically took his passport, took it over to the police, and just said, like, we got to get this guy out of the country. Uh, and yeah, eventually they were persuaded and they escorted him. Basically, we bought a plane ticket to send this guy home to America. We actually spent our own money to get rid of him. And he clearly needed help. Like, we got in touch with his family and just said, look, we're putting him on a plane. We're sending him home. Please pick him up. And he needs to go into rehab or see somebody, go into therapy or something because he was really messed up. Anyways, that kind of stuff also made me tire of the place, dealing with that kind of drama, you know? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
come on, I just want to do my job. Um, but anyways, long story short, a couple more kind of like really just like really embarrassing decisions were made that I just was like, this should have been fixed years ago. It's happening again and again and again. So I'm done. At first, I said I wanted to finish out uh, my. I had just started my third year, I think, and I was like, I'll just do one more year and just see if I can really turn things around and hopefully make this place run better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I felt like I cared a bit more about the place than the boss did because I wanted things to be really good. Uh, Partly because of my experience in Korea, I was like, well, there I knew a place that didn't deliver very good results and made the kids miserable. I want this place to do a lot better. And anyways, event I said I was gonna finish my third year, but after like 3 months, I was just like, yeah, this is not getting better. And I just basically I just walked out of the office.
That was it.
Yeah, I took my shit from the office and I told the Chinese people and they all liked me and I liked them. They were all, you know, really sad that I was leaving, but I just said, look, this is not going to work. Like I got to go. And then what I did is I went back to my apartment. I sent my boss a text message, basically just saying like I'm done and I'm going to write basically a letter explaining myself. And I wrote this big long thing uh, basically saying these are all of the problems that we've been working on, and we've temporarily had made progress on, but we're backsliding, and it basically comes down to just there's just not any like will or to really fix these things. So I just want to move on. And luckily, he was like, okay, yeah, I get it. So that was nice. I did leave on fairly good terms, but I needed to get a new job, and had a Chinese friend who just said, basically, it's even with only a BA, you can teach some low level courses at the university level, especially just if you're a native speaker. And lots of students need speaking practice and other things. And I just said, you know what? I haven't done that yet. I didn't want to work at a high school, public high school, especially because those are like torture chambers, basically, for students.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked around and I found out that one of the more prominent universities in China is actually one of their branches, anyways, is actually here in Qingdao. Or no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. No, that happened later. No, so I basically just went around. I found a recruiter actually, and I just told her I want to look at university jobs, and I had so when your work permit is canceled by your current employer, they give you 30 days to tide you over to find a new employer who can then work on a work permit for you. Your
God
work permit
damn.
is your employer. So yeah, I just said I want to look at universities, and they said, all right, this is kind of science and technology university down on the south side of the city. And I thought, okay, well, that's also good. I want to move away from where I was living, fresh start again. And yeah, went and met with the HR department, the English department at this university. And they just said, we've got a lot of students, sometimes 30, 40, 50 per class, for lots of different subjects. Do you want to get started? Basically, we'll give you a probationary period of like 3 months and stuff. And I just said, yeah. I'll do it. So I moved and started that job. And then I was there for a year, but I left. It was a great experience, actually. I really, really liked it. Teaching university students is a lot more fun. They're smarter, more clever. They have actual thoughts about things. One of the frustrating things about teaching kids is they just don't know much. So they just can't really talk about different stuff. University students are a lot more fun. But I left that job because the HR department was kind of shambolic, and I almost got kicked out of China briefly because I needed to. Okay, so my passport had about 7 months left on it before I had to renew. And the thing is that I also needed to get a renewed uh, residency permit. It's a bit hazy because this is like 4 years ago now, or 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. But basically, if your passport only has 6 months or less than 6 months on it until it expires, you can't apply for a new visa. And it came down to like I had 3 days until reaching that point where I would have less than 6 months left. And they still hadn't started the visa process. So it's like I was just screaming at them, going like, "You got to do it now, otherwise it will be too late." And I have to get a new passport, um, and but also you can't really get a new passport in country if there's only 6 months left. I think it's been a long time, but anyways, basically I had no choice. I was like suddenly I was out of time. I was just like I finished my classes at like 3 p.m. on like a Friday, or a Thursday or something like that. It was probably a Thursday actually. Uh, just went on, got train tickets, went to Beijing that night, got into a hotel. I got completely just screwed over by a taxi. It was bitterly cold. It was like December, I don't know, like 26th or something. Um, and I arrived late at night, so I can only get a couple of like one taxi. They charged way too much. It was a nightmare. But I got to the American embassy at like 8 a.m. the next morning. Went in, applied for a new passport, paid a bunch of extra money for like extra fast, like expedited uh, delivery or process. And uh, at law, passports have to be fabricated in country, or so like my passport had to be made in America, not at the embassy in Beijing. It had to be made overnight and then flown to China in like a day, basically, which is why you spend a lot of extra money.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got a new passport like within a day or two, and then I was good. They were good to go on renewing my visa. Uh, and then, but I was just like, I can't deal with this shit anymore. So I basically, after they got it all sorted out, I said I will not be renewing my contract after what the 1 year is finished. And and then yeah, I started looking at other university jobs because I was like, I really like this. I really like teaching these older students. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot more. Learned a new area of things, new subjects, and I just was like, all right. And then I got along well with a student there. He said that there's another university up the road, not very far away, and it's actually one of the most well-known universities in China, which is Ocean University of China, and that's where I am now. I am. This is my third year. Or wait a minute. No, I finished 3 years. This would be my fourth year uh, here, and it's great. The the standard of the students here is a lot higher because they have like this tiered system of universities in China, and this is like in the tier below the super famous universities like Beijing University and Tsinghua. Beijing University is basically like Harvard in China, and Tsinghua is basically like MIT basic level universities. And the way the system works is that there's like 100 or so universities that are in a bracket below that, and that's where Ocean University of China is. And yeah, it's been great. I've learned a lot about being organized and also grading things effectively and stuff like that. And yeah, that's just what I've been doing.
What subjects have you been teaching?
So I've taught there's there's a lot of courses that have levels to them. So there's speaking and debate one, speaking and debate two. There's reading and writing one, reading and writing two, and they all have like kind of different emphases, or they emphasize different things. Like reading and writing one is all about writing creative stuff, fiction. Reading and writing two, I haven't taught that before. But reading and writing four is academic writing, which I did last semester, where they have to write this big research proposal and stuff like that. But also, I've taught something called like audio visual English, which is basically like you've got a textbook that's all based on like TED Talks and stuff like that, getting the students to watch, listen, respond, interact with, that kind of thing. Lots of different things. Like I said, there's this kind of diplomatic etiquette class, which I'm new to, and or fairly new to, which I taught last year and I'm teaching now. I've also got, gosh, it's been so many now. Oh yeah, I have kind of like this pronunciation intonation class, which is more of like a linguistics class. It's not the most practical, I would say, but they learn things like the International Phonetic Alphabet, all of the rules and patterns for stress and all that kind of stuff, and in normal English speaking and stuff like that. All sorts of kind of stuff. Quite a variety. My friend Mark, I'm because he actually has a master's degree in English literature, so he handles all of that fancy stuff like novel writing and or like English novels and American literature and stuff like that. I don't really do any of that stuff. All of my classes are fairly basic, but that's the way I like it because I don't think I would really like to do the ones that are like super complicated and theoretical. I have proposed to my boss if it's possible to fit in like an actual like philosophy class. That would be cool, but um, I would say one disadvantage of this place is it's just because it's Shandong province, and Shandong is very famous for being quite conservative. It's where Confucius is from. So you give a lot of people ideas, and they're like, "Yeah, nah, keep going."
Yeah, that's great and everything, but nah.
So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And the other thing too, though, is that my work life balance is great because I only teach like 8 hours a week, and because of my experience and I've got my kind of workflow down, I don't have to spend much time on preparation. I will say one thing though is that I when I arrived, they asked me where I wanted to live. Do I want to live at the campus where I work? And I said no. I don't want to live there. I don't want to see my students during the day when I'm like on my day off. So I actually live in a neighborhood next to a different campus, and that campus is actually right next to the coast. So I live 15 minutes away from the ocean,
Hmm.
uh, and I take the subway to work, which is awesome. So it kind of keeps my where I work and where I live. I like to keep those two things separate.
So I guess this dovetails into the next thing we wanted to talk about, which is your hobbies, and then one of the other things that you've been interested in doing is learning Chinese.
Yeah.
And how is that going?
All right. So hobbies. I when I was working at the private school, I didn't do much in terms of hobbies except hanging out with people, talking about stuff, class related, just having fun by hanging out with large groups of people, mainly other foreigners. And at that time, I really didn't study any Chinese because I was just focused on the job. That's always been priority number one for self-preservation and just I just want to do my job well.
Right.
That should come first before I start focusing on other things. Um, but I sort of dabbled. I dabbled a little bit when for during my first year. I downloaded an app that taught me how to like write some Chinese characters. But to be honest, I really didn't know what I was doing at all. And then when I moved to the university, the science university, um, I think that was around the time that I started to suspect, though, that there's something wrong with my brain in terms of like being a serial procrastinator, kind of like being unable to keep up with people back home, no matter how much I tried, and feeling really bad about it. And in my free time, I got obsessed with, especially when the pandemic hit. But I think we can save the pandemic for a different uh, conversation, different episode maybe. Uh, but I started spending huge amounts of my free time, sometimes playing games. I got into Europa Universalis strategy game, which is a lot of fun. And but I got obsessed with reading about the psychology of procrastination and how it works and why people do it, and kind of like trying to develop strategies for not doing it. Um, and just failing again and again and again, like nothing worked. But then I got caught up again with the job, changing jobs, moving to the Ocean University, and around that time I was like, you know what, I really need to get off my ass and start studying Chinese. So I kind of was sort of figuring it out. I knew that I didn't want to have a teacher, uh, which has its pros and cons. Teachers can give you structure, they can give you accountability and stuff. But I knew that some people have achieved very high levels in languages without having a teacher, and essentially, I basically decided to get away from traditional language teaching, which involves textbooks and stuff, and adopting a more of an immersion approach, which means a lot of reading and a lot of listening,
Hmm.
and to give you like the foundation in the language and to delay speaking for a long time. Because if you speak too much too early, you can actually develop bad habits, bad grammar, bad pronunciation, and stuff like that. And that's pretty much what I've been trying to do ever since. It's just that I've always struggled with it because it's hard to motivate myself, and it's like it's a marathon. It's not a race. It's like you just have to consistently hammer away at it every day for a long time. And I've gone through periods of being like highly motivated, doing a lot for a short amount of time, and then just giving up for like months.
Hmm.
um, but I don't know. I've made progress. I'd say my speaking is still pretty bad, but um, the experience of language learning, it's like you'll go through long periods of feeling like you're not making much progress, and then suddenly there's like this quantum leap where you've broken through, and then you feel good, and then you go back to the grind and you feel like you haven't made any progress. But also I would say I haven't studied the most efficiently. I know what the best practices are, but they're hard for me to do, like sitting down at the computer and paying very paying a TV show, for example, very high amounts of attention. Like that's one of the things that you really need to do to get good fast, and you need to do that for many hours. That's really hard for me. Sitting down in a chair, staring at his computer screen.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's one of my least favorite things. I like, well, unless I'm playing video games, I like
well,
moving
exactly.
and doing different shit all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So I tried to make things more mobile. I got a flashcard app on my phone. That makes it a lot easier. I can walk and go, do my flashcards, study grammar, study vocabulary and stuff like that. But and then also eventually I got an MP3 player, an actual MP3 player. They still exist. They're super cheap. They got a long battery life, and they are not as distracting as a smartphone. So overall, I'm still making progress, but I'd still say that I don't put in nearly enough hours per day. But basically, I was still kind of like in between all of this, kind of going like, why the hell am I having so much trouble being productive? Like it seems like other people have an easier time just doing shit. They just choose, I want to do this, and then they just do it. Whereas I seem to have lots of things I want to do, but it feels like my brain is kind of like kneecapping itself. And I think I watched something on YouTube about ADHD, and they're like, these are the symptoms. And I was like, oh my God, really? That sounds exactly like me. And so I found a hospital here in China that focuses on uh, like mental illness, basically. And I went in and I sat down with this doctor, and she asked me some basic questions, and I was like, "Yeah, I think maybe this." And she's like, "Well, it could also be bipolar." And I was like, "Oh God," because my grandfather had it, and probably my brother actually. Um, and so that shit is definitely genetic. Um, but anyway, she sat me down at a computer that had like a 100 like true false multiple choice questionnaire, all in English, which I was very lucky to find, asking questions about symptoms and how you feel and stuff. And also I did an eye tracking test. Apparently people with ADHD have trouble with keeping their eyes focused on things. It's like one of the weird correlations that nobody's quite sure why these things are correlated. Um, Stuff like that, blood test, all the rest of it. And then I took this survey, and they're like, yeah, we got, it's like 97% that you probably have combined type ADHD. There's two different kinds, two main kinds. There's inattentive, which people often associate more like with girls, spacey type girls, in the back of the room, daydreaming. That's how it often presents in girls, roughly. And then for boys, there's like the hyperactive kind, which is like can't sit still, all that kind of stuff. Just got to do shit. And then there's like the combined type, which is you've got a bit of both, and that's pretty much me. Uh, so it explains a lot. And basically, for the last, I'd say, year and a half, I haven't prioritized the language learning stuff so much, although I am ramping up on it more again. But I'm trying to do the things that keep me sane, like taking my medication and exercising. Exercising is really important for people. who have ADHD, doing your exercise actually helps you focus, and trying to stay away from things like alcohol, because that ruins it. Yeah, so just kind of figuring out how my brain works, trying to be healthy, and also that's another reason why I like my job, because I've got a lot of free time to do the kind of self-care things that I need to do. Because if I was working 40 hours a week, then I would probably be burnt out really fast. It's really unfortunate, and I feel really bad for people who either don't have the time or the money or the ability in some way or another for dealing with their mental disabilities. I think it causes a lot of suffering. So my job is great for me right now, because I can kind of do the things that keep me sane, and keep going without burning out.
Well, that's
So yeah,
good. Identifying those things, work-life balance is a major thing, which is what I had a very stressful summer.
yeah,
I was working 14, 16-hour days, 6 days a week for like 6 months
yeah,
with my business. And, you know, at the point where I had the opportunity to expand rapidly
hmm
or just slow it down a little bit.
hmm
And, well, recruiting people and hiring people is very difficult, which is why I oftentimes just do things myself because I don't trust anyone else to do it correctly, even professionals.
yeah,
And I've had that experience with lawyers, accountants, neighbors, I mean, clients, employees, business partner. This has been a like you said, a quantum leap in uh, life lessons, you could say.
hmm
But
cool.
so what have you been doing to kind of immerse yourself into the? So correct me if I'm wrong, but Qingdao is heavily influenced by German culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the old part of the town is based off of it's almost like a model replica of like an actual German town back in Germany. Actually, my friend Mark, he's got a friend, a German guy who's a kind of like a biologist who does research on Alzheimer's. The Chinese government just like gave him millions of dollars to do research, because I think he used to do research at the University of Ulster, which is in Northern Ireland. That's how Mark and this guy met, and I guess they were just fucking like messing around with him, messing with his budget, his staff, and stuff like that. And he just quit. And then the Chinese were just like, "Oh, we'll just give you a bunch of money, set up a lab in this city. We'll give you everything you need." Anyways, um, yeah, he's actually from the town in Germany that the colonial part of Qingdao was based off of. Basically, it's got lots of old narrow streets and things, kind of like from 100 years ago. And um, but talking about language immersion, basically, oh God, I've tried so many different things, and like it's really hard to use movies and TV shows in China because they're all terrible. They're just not good. And any Chinese person who's spent a lot of time watching, you know, lots of foreign films, English films, they just know the quality of the average Hollywood film, even though they produce a lot of trash too, is still better than like a lot of the best in China. There's very few good TV shows here, so
Have you
you
watched
can't.
any of the crossover films? So like Parasite, which just won Academy
I
Awards.
I have not seen Parasite. Parasite's Korean though, right? But I
I'm
haven't seen
not
it.
sure.
I think it's Korean, but I haven't seen it. I heard it's good, but I don't know. I just haven't gotten around to it. There are the only Chinese thing that I watched recently that I actually liked and held my attention is the three body problem. But that's not particularly good from a language learning point of view because they use a lot of technical, jargon and physics terms and stuff like that, and that stuff is so rare and not
Niche.
particularly useful. Yeah, I mean, I will get around to watching it. It's kind of like one of my long term goals is to get to the point where I can watch that comfortably and get something from it. But like right now, it's like I still would need to watch it with English subtitles to keep up what's going on. So basically, the best material is just stuff on YouTube with English subtitles, Chinese subtitles. You watch it with the English subtitles to know what's going on, and then you rewatch without. And then what I do is I download the video, or sorry, I download the audio from those videos, put them on the MP3 player, and then I can listen to it again and again and again. Now, it's still not like, basically I need to do more of the sitting down and really really paying attention, because the more attention you focus, the more attention you pay, the more you will get out of it. Luckily my reading ability, or my listening ability, is already good enough to where I can kind of just turn something on without any context, and if I focus a little bit I can sort of figure out what they're talking about, which is also a good thing to do, because it trains your brain to just like infer what's going on naturally the way you do automatically with your own language. So radio, podcasts, stuff like that. But in order to really push the cutting edge of your understanding, you do have to do a first pass of something new by really focusing. So what I did in order to solve this problem is I bought a tablet. I bought a tablet like 2 weeks ago. So I've been busy, so I haven't really got around to moving all of my videos and stuff onto the tablet. But it's not just sitting in front of my computer, which is bad. It's just being in my apartment. My brain associates my apartment with you relaxing, messing around, having fun. It's just not the place for me to do my study. So I'm going to put everything on the tablet, and then I can take that, go to a coffee shop, get a cup of coffee, and really really focus. And then yeah, that's pretty much what I need to do, and I need to do more. Um, the other thing that I'm up to though is that it's really strange, but recently it's like you've been wanting to have a call and do kind of a podcast, but also me and my colleague Mark and one of our colleagues called Alan in England, uh, the three of us want to create kind of like a new podcast that's all about teachers and teaching. And the idea is to do interviews with teachers and kind of do what we're doing today, what you're doing now,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of like, where are you from? What's your educational background? Where'd you go to, university? Tell us about yourself. Like, how'd you get into teaching? And do the rundown on that. And basically, that's where we're going to get started. Last week, I interviewed Mark, and if I can figure out how to, do you have any like cloud shit like service that you use?
Not on the
I don't.
regular, but
Okay.
you
Okay.
can use, I mean, Google storage.
Google Storage. Yeah, yeah. I do have an account. I wonder what the limits are for the free version. Because I have an interview with Mark. I'm standing behind the camera. He's talking. I'm introducing him, and it was really really good. We did that last Thursday, and then tomorrow, which will be Thursday, we're gonna flip it. He's going to interview me. So I'm going to say a lot of the same things I talked about today in this call with him. So that's what we're
Sure.
going to try to do tonight. I'm going to give Alan a call, maybe on Zoom, and I'm going to try to interview him, get his biography, teaching background story. And so, yeah, we're not sure what we're going to call it, but we want to get into it because we also want to make a podcast, which is it's like for teachers who are interested in it, but also we want to make a lot of listening content material for Chinese people who want to learn English. We haven't really worked out all the details, but mainly getting into the habit of doing it and then just figuring out the details later, kind of like a just do it mentality rather than getting stuck in the whole like, oh, we need to plan everything and we need to think about all the details but never actually getting started. That's a mistake that I always make, is kind of like never getting started, spending too much time thinking about doing something and then not doing it. So
Yeah, I find
uh,
it's just best to jump in the deep end.
yeah. So this is perfect time. Every Wednesday between my classes, this is a perfect time for me to do this call.
Yeah, and we're gonna do a lot of different topics
Yeah.
on my podcast. I still haven't really decided on the name yet. I might just stick with Circling the Drain. I still think it sticks. It works well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have informal ones, but then we're gonna have some higher level kind of philosophical discussions. And my latest obsession is geopolitics. In fact, during the winter semester, I am going to start taking online courses. Well,
Okay.
two. And, well, I'm going to learn my geography again. So, well, not just but like historical geography, which is
Yeah.
important. You need to understand what has occurred for like the last 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And I just want to get up to speed on all that. And then the cultural stuff will be, threaded into that as well.
Sure.
But I mean, because what I'm interested in now are like the socioeconomic, mainly market, fluctuations and things like that. Because I'm a business owner and
Yeah.
I might want to get into manufacturing at some point. And manufacturing is coming back to the States, and that's really what I want to be involved in. I mean, I like construction, but project management and being a general contractor and things like that. But what I really want to do is build a factory and start building shit out of bioplastics. I still want to do that,
Yeah.
but and more manufacturing is coming back to the States. But that'll be a topic for
Sure.
another day.
Yeah.
Um, but we're at what, a hour and 20 minutes.
Yep. I pretty much have got to go. I need to eat something and do some final prep for my next class.
All right. Well, this works out pretty well. So each one will be around, an hour and a half or so. That's a pretty good
Yeah.
chunk.
Yes. I
And
think
you and
so.
I
I feel
can
like
we can
I was just
fly
gonna
through
say I feel
stuff
like
in
an
an hour and a
hour.
half.
Yeah, an hour and a half is definitely enough to give us time to dwell on certain topics, but not too much.
So before I let you go, what are you thinking you want to discuss on the next podcast?
Oh man. I mean, I'm just gonna call this your podcast because I'm sort of with my other teaching buddies. Uh, uh, I'm going to be doing the legwork on that podcast because we need to make transcripts for that, English and Chinese transcripts. So uh, it's up to you. I mean, whatever you want to talk about. And yeah,
Well, let's throw some topics out and then we can discuss them over the next week or so. Well, the next thing, well, we kind of ran out of time today, but I wanted to get into, compare and contrast just your cultural experiences. not just
oh yeah,
between not just between the United States and China, but also South Korea and China. And what
hmm
I'd really like to get in is the diversity in China
yes,
and the like kind of the history of the ethnicities in China.
okay,
So, in the conflicts, as it were, between
hmm
those groups.
sure,
Because Chinese history is absolutely fascinating. I've been watching just podcast after podcast,
hmm
and
yeah.
it's absolutely fascinating.
So we
Well, and
maybe we
just
can just combine that basically if you want to do an episode that's like China, geopolitics kind of centered episodes. Like, well, just part of that episode, I can just talk about my own personal experience because I also think that there's just so many misconceptions about Chinese people, or if not misconceptions, incomplete kind of the way a lot of Western people think about China. I would say at the very least, it's a very incomplete picture. Um, I remember a long time ago, it was like one of the first times I talked to my dad when I came to China, and he was just like, "So they're all riding bicycles over there," and I was just like, "Dude, that is so out of date." Like, but I think a lot of people just don't know much. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into there. But all right, well, I think we know what our topic is going to be for the next one, and
Sounds good.
but I'm going to stop recording here in a second, but stay on.
Sure.
We'll talk for a minute.
Okay.
But we'll end the podcast there, man.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, till
Bye
next
bye,
time.
everybody.